One time we're out in the middle of the night. We got guns and handcuffs in the trunk. I'm with Foxy and Funzy. I don't know what we were doing. We were casing a truck or something. And sure enough, we get pulled over by NYPD. I'm sitting in the front seat, and Funzy goes to the back to show his license and registration. So something instinctively told me to take the key off the key ring that opens the trunk. In those days, you didn't have a button to open the trunk. So I slipped over there and I took the key and I put it in my pocket. He was on federal parole, and he knows the guns and the handcuffs are in the trunk. And the cop tells him, open the trunk. And he says, let me get the keys. I don't know what he was going to do, but he didn't know I took the key off the ring. He goes, oh yeah, here's the keys. And the cop puts the key in and it doesn't open the trunk. He didn't have anything that was illegal. He didn't have anywhere to get a ticket. But so the cop says, oh, this key doesn't fit. He said, oh, he got it right away. I must have left it home. So he talked his way out of it and off we went. Damn. He got in the car and he was so celebratory. Oh my God, Ubats, what made you take that key off there? I said, I had a sense that the cop was going to tell you to open the trunk. So I owe you a dinner. He wanted to kiss me on the cheek.
Welcome back to A Lifetime of Mafia Tales. Today, Sal shares a big-time robbery story that Genovese mobster Big Funzi told him that he had pulled off. In this story, he mentioned quite a few mob guys that were involved in this heist. They got a lot of money from this heist. It is also rumored that Colombo Underboss Sonny Franzese was the one that ended up with a lot of this money from this heist. Please subscribe to our Patreon channel for an exclusive story about Sal's life in the Mafia. Also, please be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel to get more videos from Sal and myself. And without further ado, let's get into this story. Alright, welcome back everybody. Sal, how you feeling this morning, man? We're going to be doing a good episode today.
This is really an interesting storyline about a guy I met. I think I might have met him in 1968 or 69 through Dominic Cataldo. They were close friends.
Yeah, the guy we're talking about today is Big Funzi, and he was possibly a made man in the Genovese family, and he told you about a robbery that he had done with some other guys called the Harbor Island Spa, wasn't it? That was the name of the place they went and robbed. Yeah. So with that, like you could break down and go into detail about this whole story and why Funzi told you this story and what your thoughts were on the story, and just really go into a lot of detail with it, because also it was rumored that Sonny Franzese may have been a part of the story as well. So
right.
Take us back and let us know like a little bit about Funzi, who he was, and why he told you this story.
Well, during the early 70s, the same time that I had met Foxy, I met Foxy in 71, and we worked from 72, 3, 4. We hung out with, we called him Big Al, Alphonse Tarricone, Funzi. And he looked at himself as being a brilliant thief. He was always planning things, However, he was reluctant to go up front, like on a hijacking. He didn't want to go approach the driver, or if it was a robbery, he didn't want to approach the victim because of his height. And I think the feds had a book on him. They knew that he was a professional thief. So Funzi and Foxy and I, we didn't mind. We told him, hey, Funzi, we'll go up front. We'll make the move. Make the move was the thing. And he didn't want to be looked at upon the guy who stood out in left field, was like, not on the front of making the move on a heist. Many times we would be planning hijackings, and I think he was kind of reluctant to let certain groups like the Gotti group, Fatico, those guys buy our merchandise when we hijacked the truck, because he knew that their intention was actually to rip us off. But he did like Jimmy Burke. And we did several hijackings, garment loads. He was involved with the silver heist that we did. So, and he was involved in the silver heist and the watch heist that we did. He was an interesting guy that he wound up eventually getting made in Genovese family. But like I said, I met him like probably 1968, 69. I didn't do anything with him until the 70s. And he occasionally loved to tell stories about some of the heists that he was involved in. And one particular story was about a heist in Florida, and it was called the Harbor Island Spar. And I think he had these two friends. One guy's name was Johnny Irish, and Big Jerry, Jerry Gualtieri, I think his name was. And they actually hung out in my uncle's hotel in the mid 60s with Sonny Franzese. I believe they were assigned to Sonny Franzese. So whether Sonny Franzese was actually involved in that robbery down there in Florida, I don't know. But what I do know, he gave me the details how they did that robbery, and I thought it was interesting.
So with this, like, he would just be really at this point when he was telling you these stories. He was like your crime partner, and you guys were or heist partner, I suppose. You guys
Right,
were doing all kinds of stuff. He
right,
trusted you. You
right.
introduced him to some people, and so he
Yeah,
felt comfortable enough to say, "All right, well, why
yeah.
did he tell you this actually? Because there's a reason he told you it."
Yeah, well, he told the story because one, he didn't trust wise guys. They'd be ripping off people, which later on he became a made guy. And the other was because he'd like to brag on how much how much detail he was involved in when doing a heist because he would always be asking questions. And I was working on a jewelry heist, and of course he got involved. He didn't have to do anything but drive the car. And he said that when they did that heist in Florida, they got into that hotel, went into it was a large vault, like because it was a pretty good size spa hotel and spa, and they went in there with sledgehammers and they broke into the safe deposit boxes. Anybody who's in a bank knows how a safe deposit, vault is set up. The little tiny small boxes, medium boxes, they even have large boxes. And so he said their strategy was to go in there and hit each box two or three times with these mini sledgehammers they had. And if it broke open, then they would take the drawer out, dump everything into an army duffel bag, and move on. And they were only going to be there so many minutes, and they had planned it out. So I guess he was inside the vault, hitting those boxes and dumping stuff in the army duffel bags, and then eventually they left. Whether they how many boxes they broke into, I don't know. He said many of them didn't open, so they just moved on to the next one. So he made it back to New York, and I think there was a lot of cash. Nobody knows how much cash was in those safe deposit boxes, but it was reported a couple of $1 million was robbed in that at that hotel, which was a lot of money in the 60s.
Yeah, a whole lot of money, man.
Yeah, yeah. It was sort of like what the bypass gang did. They'd break into a bank and break into all those safe deposit boxes, empty them, and no one really would know what was in the safe deposit boxes. A lot of times, thieves and crooks and drug dealers would stash their stolen merchandise or their drugs in a bank.
That's insane. Could you
Yeah,
imagine, man?
yeah. He said that they found some cocaine in a couple of boxes because it was a safe place to put it.
I guess, yeah,
Yeah,
because even the people that at the bank don't know what's in there.
exactly. Exactly. So he went through all the details because we were going to do this jewelry heist, which didn't come off. We did another jewelry heist together. And he was a very technical guy. Foxy called him Technical Alphonse. And yeah, we would do these heists and he would negotiate with Jimmy Burke, because he was a lot older than us, maybe 10, 15 years older. Um, but over the years, I knew a lot about him. He went to jail in the 50s on a bank robbery charge, got out. Everybody knew him. I think he was, I think he became close to the chin, Vincent Chiganti, because I heard years later that he got made into the Genovese family. But he was also a secret drug dealer.
He
I
was
knew he,
too.
I knew he was dealing drugs, and he had me swear on my children I would never tell anybody, which I never did. So
How'd you find it out?
because he had me test his heroin. I had a I had a professional chemist that would test heroin and give me the reading. And the biggest part of buying heroin is, what are you really buying? Are you buying pure merchandise, or are you buying stuff that's already been cut? So I learned that from Cataldo over the years. Cataldo used to go to France and come back with and ship the heroin back. So he'd get pure heroin. And also, he was part of the group that got the French Connection heroin out of the New York City police property clerk's office. So Funzi had one customer.
Who's
I don't know
and
where he got the heroin from. Maybe he was getting it from Cataldo, but he had me swear that I would never tell anybody. And I kept my promise. I didn't tell anybody, but he always wanted to get it tested because he wanted to be able to tell his customer that it was pure heroin. And
so
so he managed to get pure heroin.
so did he know that you were dealing drugs, or like why did he confess?
Oh
And
yeah, he knew. Yeah.
how how do you know with
Because
Cataldo
I
or
told him, I go, I secretly got a little thing. So
oh
we have to
man,
keep this between ourselves. I said, Foxy doesn't even want to hear about it because Foxy refused to get involved in the drug business.
he didn't want no part of it.
No, but I was making money. I don't know how much, maybe at one point 10, 20,000 a week, which was a lot of money in the 70s. And then I had built up this Shylock business. I had a whole bunch of customers, but they were small customers. They weren't customers that borrowed 5,000, 10,000. They were all customers that borrowed 500, $1,000. But I would get the maximum VIG, like 5%. So if a guy borrowed 1,000 off me, he'd pay me 50 a week interest. So for years I had, a dozen or two customers. And then as Budsy made this money with the drug business, he wanted to become a big time Shylock. So I was going to move upstate New York in 82. And he said, sell me your business. This turns out to be kind of a humorous story. So look, I'll show you the business. I had guys that were, from the Sinatra Club in the 70s. And now this is like 82, early 82. I said, I'll sell you the business. Uh, I got about 45, 50,000 out in the street. You pay me half and I'll give you the business. And then you can, I'll tell you how much interest I'm charging on each loan. So he agreed. So he gave me like 10 or 20,000 down. And eventually when I moved upstate New York, he just, he kind of reneged on paying the rest. Once he became a made guy, he thought he had special privileges. I really didn't care. I wanted to bail out. And this one particular customer that we had, his name was Stanley. And he lived a block or two away from where I lived in Ozone Park. And he drove a bus, New York City. He worked for New York City. He was a bus driver. And Stanley was a gambler, so he would lose money and he'd get deep into the Shylock thing. But I had a limit on him for like $2,000. But I would loan him the money. He'd pay the interest for 6 months a year. Then he'd get to the point where he couldn't pay the interest. So I'd say, look, there's a knockdown sort of function where you tell me, look, you've been paying $100 a week interest on 2,000. Just give me 150 a week, and I'll start taking your loan down, and you could pay it all off. He said, I'll borrow money from my mother-in-law. So he'd get money from his mother-in-law, and I'd cut him loose, down to almost $500, which is only 25 a week. So when I sold the business to Funzi, I said, look, this guy Stanley, he's a very timid guy. Whatever you do, don't threaten the guy. Okay. I didn't know who it was, but he knew somebody who worked for the FBI, Stanley. So I told Funzi, just give him $1,000. Funzi gives him 1,000. The guy, gets what we call banged up. The guy gets against it. He borrows another 1,000. Now he's got 2,000. He's giving him 100 a week. But Stanley didn't make that much money driving a bus, and he's a gambler. He's a degenerate horse gambler. Finally, Stanley has a heart attack because Funzi threatens him and he's in the hospital. So Funzi calls him up in the hospital and threatens him on the phone.
Jeez.
Well, when I get out, so he tells me the story. I go, "Why'd you threaten the guy? I told you, he's a scarecrow. He might go to the feds." Sure enough, Stanley went to the feds. They recorded the phone calls, and Fonzie would get all excited. He'd be holding the phone, talk to him, and he'd be like, "I'm gonna choke you. I'll choke you. I'll choke you." And he was, like twisting the headset. And of course, the feds got the information. They busted him. So eventually, he had to take a plea, and he went to federal prison for 5 years. But Funzi was a character. I mean, he liked me because I had certain instincts. He had this big old Cadillac. And during the 70s, we'd drive around in this four-door Cadillac, big black Cadillac. He liked Cadillacs and Lincolns. And one time we're out in the middle of the night, and we got guns and handcuffs in the trunk. I'm with Foxy and Funzy. I don't know what we were doing. We were casing a truck or something, watching a factory or something like that. And sure enough, we get pulled over by NYPD. I'm sitting in the front seat, and Funzy goes to the back to show his license and registration. So something instinctively told me to take the key off the key ring that opens the trunk. In those days, you didn't have a button to open the trunk. It was a General Motors car. You had two different keys, one for the ignition and one for the trunk. And the one for the trunk, I think, also fit the glove box. And I think the ignition key also fit the door. So I slipped over there and I took the key and I put it in my pocket. And after 5 minutes, because it used to take 5-10 minutes for them to call in the plate number, he was on federal parole. And he knows the guns and the handcuffs are in the trunk. And the cop tells him, "Open the trunk." And he says, let me get the keys. I don't know what he was going to do, but he didn't know I took the key off the ring. He goes, "Oh yeah, here's the keys." And the cop puts the key in and it doesn't open the trunk. He didn't have anything that was illegal. He didn't have anywhere to get a ticket. But so the cop says, "Oh, this key doesn't fit." He said, "Oh, he got it right away. I must have left it home." So he talked his way out of it and off we went. He got in the car and he was so celebratory. "Oh my God, Ubats, what made you take that key off there?" I said, "I had a sense that the cop was going to tell you to open the trunk." He said, "Oh, I owe you a dinner." He wanted to kiss me on the cheek. Instinctively, I just took that key and he said, "What'd you do with the key?" I think I put it in my pocket or I put it in my shoe. I don't remember. So, of course, he told everybody the story that's how we got away because he was on federal parole for years. So he always liked me, but he was sort of like he was trustworthy, but he was selfish. Once he got made, he became very egotistical. He had a girlfriend. He was just a guy that was obsessed with his looks, his appearance. He had a bunch of hair. He would do a comb over. He had a pinky ring. I mean, he was really the image of wise guys. But we were friends. And eventually, like I said, when I went upstate New York in 82, I sold him all those loans and I tried to warn him not to threaten Stanley. So he threatened Stanley and wound up getting, I don't know, 10 years or something up there. And then he would call me up. It was only like 7 miles away. Otisville Federal Penitentiary was 7 miles from where I lived. And he'd beg me to bring him some chicken and some shrimp. And I'd cook the food, put it in a little plastic bag, put it in my socks. And I'd go visit him and slip him the food. And it was a big deal. Again, he had no clue. That was 82. In 84, when I flipped, he probably was in shock that I flipped and he read about it. But we were friends for a long time. And like I said, he had the balls of a lion, but he was afraid that the feds were going to spot him because they had a book on him. They had a book on known hijackers, and he was in the book.
And he would have stood out.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Just being so tall and everything,
yeah,
man.
He did stick out, I don't know how he died or what happened, but eventually, when I went upstate New York, after I visited him in the prison, and then I flipped in '84. I never spoke to him again. The feds never asked me much about him, but we were friends for 15 years, you know, and we did a whole bunch of hijackings together, a lot of trucks.
Do
And
you
he was close with Gotti.
do you remember your last words you had with him before you went and cooperated?
I don't. I remember going back dealing drugs in 80, 82, 83, and I didn't see him much. He called me a couple of times, and I went to visit him. He knew that I was, deeply entrenched in the heroin business in the '70s, but he didn't know much about. Although he did like cocaine, he'd do a sniff here and there. So he was a wise guy who liked a couple of lines of coke, and I always had good coke.
Well, with Big Funzi, like there's not many guys that you shared your drug business with, or like that you
Right,
told them about. So, like, what
right.
made you trust Big Funzi with this?
I don't know. I mean, I think maybe Dominic might have told him because Cataldo and I, we were always in that business together. Whether Cataldo gave him heroin. I don't know. All I know is wherever he was getting it, he was worried that it was cut, what we called it was stepped on. It was not pure. But I would test the stuff, and it was pretty close to being pure. And he was excited about that because that's what got you more money, and that's what kept your customer. That you sold him the right merchandise.
Did he say where he was getting his stuff from?
He never said where he got it, and he never said where it was going. But he had me swear on my children that I wouldn't tell anybody. And he
Hmm.
only did like one move a month. Maybe it was a half a kilo, maybe made a couple thousand. I don't know. I didn't give him anything. I didn't get anything from him. And his life changed, I think, when he got made, because that was probably in the late '70s, you know, maybe right around the time that Gotti's kid was killed and he was part of that kidnapping. He didn't brag about that too much, but he claimed that he was close to John Gotti.
Yeah, that's what you were kind of going into. I mean, what did you hear, or what did you understand that he was close with Gotti, John Gotti Senior?
I don't know. I think one of the feds might have told me that they suspected that he was part of the kidnapping because they got some witnesses to talk about where the guy was kidnapped at the furniture factory in the parking lot, and that there was one big tall guy that was carrying him off. I'm not sure if it was Funzi or maybe it was that guy, the guy from Boston, Big Red. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention. That was '79 or early '80. I think it was like it must have been after the kid was killed was '80. So it must have been around that time.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been. Who knows, really, who all would have been involved with that? None of the guys ever got caught or anything
No,
like that. They never even
no.
found a body. When and
Right.
the kidnapping you're referring to is the guy that was John Gotti's neighbor and ran over
Right.
his kid and
Right.
killed him. Yeah, so that
But
just so people that are listening, they know.
Big Funzy was close to Charles Caniglia.
Really, what was their relationship?
Well, Charles Caniglia made us a key once to do a jewelry robbery.
Damn, what would you guys do with it?
Well, the thing was, Cataldo and Donnelly went to heist this jeweler from 47th Street from the jewelry exchange. They got some information. They went to heist him in Brooklyn. And as they approached the jeweler in the parking lot, this must have been, oh, maybe the early '70s, some woman spotted them and screamed. And so they fled the scene and they never followed up on the robbery. And I said to Big Fuzzy, he knew about it. He wasn't involved in the robbery. I said, I got the name and I got the address of that guy that Dominic and Jackie, bailed out on. And the guy had this high end jewelry. I said, what I'd like to do is follow him and do a sneak move. I just have to get a key from. I'd have to get a key to get into his trunk. So Funchy says, "Hey, listen, I know Charles. Charles was good with locks and keys and cars. So Funzy went ahead and got that key made. And that's how we heisted that bunch of jewelry. Of course, when we got all the jewelry, he wasn't even on the scene. He just followed with a car between between actually it wasn't Foxy that was involved in that heist of that jewelry. We had another guy named Vinny that was good with locks and stuff. So it was me, Vinny, and Big Funzy. And we went back to his house and we divided all that stuff up. And he decided he'll sell his and I'd sell mine. And Vinny sold him. Vinny was the guy that I called Vinny Crooked Cock. He was the guy that had a
He
penis
was,
that yeah. It was like it had a 90-degree end. The end of his penis was like 90 degrees going to the left or something. But we
yeah.
pulled it off. We got a good score. And in the opening of the Sinatra movie, that jewelry that I was putting all over the girl Jane, that came from that heist.
Oh, okay. That was the heist you were referring to then.
Yeah, yeah. So Funzy was always involved. He was always in left field. He didn't do a lot, but he got a piece of the action.
That's what I was gonna say, because each one of these heists, it sounds like he was a part of it, but from a distance.
Left field, we called him. And
Yeah,
Foxy would say in the early 70s, yeah, Funzy's out in left field. It's okay because we trusted him. We could trust him.
yeah. I mean, and yeah, your instincts were right because he never went and flipped or anything like
No,
that. He's
no,
so he. I mean, he ended up dying though. I suppose I'm not sure what he died in, if he died in
I
prison
don't.
or
I don't know
whatever
what
happened
happened.
with him.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to him at the end because, like I said, the last time I saw him was in '82. He was up in Otisville prison. He was up there and he met that guy George from the movie Blow.
And so at that time, he would have been like what, 6 years old? I think
Uh,
Big Funzy maybe in '82.
oh, maybe he was about 10 or 15 years older than me, so um, 60-ish, yeah. Anyway, that was our relationship for years and years. Like I said, when I had the deli, I gave his daughter. He had two daughters, one named Marie and one named Antoinette, and he had a son named Joe. I gave Joe a job on my jewelry store. I always gave them jobs. We were friends.
Kept it in the family, I suppose you could say.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
crime
Maybe,
family.
maybe some of our listeners might know about who he was. His name was Alphonse Tarricone. So he was a character, and he spent his whole life, as a thief.
Did he tell you how he got into it at all?
No, I think in the late 50s or maybe 1960. I'm not sure. He went away for bank robbery,
No, so
and
even before your time.
yeah, and he was involved with that Johnny Irish and that Big Jerry. They were friends
Did they
over the
seem?
years.
Did they kind of seem to be crime partners? I suppose for a
I
while.
guess I really didn't know those guys. Funzy was the type of guy that kept everybody separate, away from each other.
Yeah. Well, that's how it sounds like what Cataldo was. So I mean, it's just
Yeah,
again these old school guys how they were. They just
right.
kept shit separate, man. They
Yeah,
weren't
everybody
involved in
kept
everything.
stuff separate. They didn't let the left know what the right was doing. But he was the character. He was a funny guy, and he liked the life of a mobster. He had the girlfriend, the fancy car, the pinky ring, and all that stuff.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
what is like some kind of lesson or message that people could take away from this one?
There's always another side to crime. And what he said to me was after they after they got information about all the people that lost jewelry and money. There was one particular little Jewish guy who had $1 million in a box in one of those safe deposit boxes. And the whole caveat about this thing was you never know what's going to happen during a robbery. Well, the feds, when they made everybody open the boxes, they found that $1 million in that safe deposit box. And the poor little Jewish guy in New York went to jail for tax evasion, and they kept $1 million.
Damn. Just that's so he was just hiding all of his money. He didn't want nobody to
Right,
get it
right,
taxed or anything, man.
right,
So
right. Yeah.
You got to pay your taxes, man.
From
Even
what Funzi said, he was a guy that was in the dry cleaning business, and he sifted and he scammed all that money. So the funny line was the little Jewish guy was laundering money.
that's what he called it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, no, I mean that was a pretty little side interesting story about Sonny Franzese, being involved with this as well.
Yeah.
I mean, all that really was with this heist that they did, the Harbor Island Spa, like the money would have been kicked up to him, right? I mean that would have been the case because he was there was a member of Sonny's crew involved in
Yeah, I
this
think the
heist.
Johnny Irish guy and the Big Jerry, they were under Sonny Franzese. I mean, I never heard much more about it. Funzi didn't give the details. He was careful to stay away from some wise guys that he didn't like or trust. And
Yeah.
what I don't think he had much of a relationship with Sonny Franzese. It was just sort of like a rumor, you know. Maybe Michael Franzese knows the story. I don't know. Maybe he'll tell the story.
Yeah. Well, what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go over to Patreon, everyone, and then we're gonna talk about more about Sonny Franzese coming in to Sal's uncle's bar as a kid. Sal got to witness and be around him, but not really talk to him as much. But we're gonna go over there and talk about that. So thank you
Okay.
for watching in today's episode about this heist, that Big Funzi, a lot of Big Funzi history here. So we appreciate you tuning in and watching that. If you haven't seen our other videos, check them out. All you got to do is just go to our YouTube channel, click the playlist, and click A Lifetime of Mafia Tales, or you can click the Sal and Adrian live shows. I mean, we got about 50, 60 episodes out there, so check them out. If you enjoyed this episode, or like I said, we're going to go over to Patreon now, so if you want to subscribe to our Patreon, all you got to do is just go to the video link and sign up. But yeah, we got some more stories coming out, so I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for tuning in. Well, I hope you all enjoyed Sal's story that he heard from Big Funzi. This just goes to show that the criminal life is a dead end. You can't even trust your fellow criminals. Please comment any key takeaways that you got from this interview. Please share it with anyone that you think will enjoy this type of content. Please be sure to subscribe to our Patreon channel for more exclusive stories about Sal's life in the Mafia. Also, please be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel to get more videos from Sal and myself. At the end of this video, 2 playlists will pop up. One is A Lifetime of Mafia Tales, and the other is mine and Sal's live shows we do. Check them out. I think you'll enjoy them if you enjoyed this interview today. Also, please check out my podcast called the Invest in Yourself Podcast. It's on the same YouTube channel. You can access that podcast by clicking the YouTube icon and then going to the playlist option and clicking the Invest in Yourself Podcast. I interview ex-gangsters, ex-criminals, ex-drug dealers, ex-drug smugglers, former addicts. There's so many different people that I've interviewed on there, but they all got one thing in common: a great redemption story. Thank you again so much for watching, and of course, we'll see you on the next one. If you would like to support our podcast, we got a few items that you can purchase. All of these items can be found in the video description below. The first one is Sal's book, The Sinatra Club. You can get this personally autographed by Sal. The next one in our hottest seller is the 1972 Sinatra Club playing cards. Back in Sal's Mafia days, he opened up his own social club named the Sinatra Club. Many mobsters would come to this club, even when there were all-out wars going on between different families. They would come to the Sinatra Club and play cards. Some of the mobsters that played with these cards were John Gotti, Dominic Cataldo, Tommy DeSimone, Foxy, Jimmy Burke, Willie Boy Johnson, Tony Roach, Henry Hill, Joe DeFede, Danny Fatico, Gene Gotti, Peter Gotti, Joey Scopo, and many more. We're selling each one of these cards for $10 a piece. These cards are limited, we only got 1,000 of them. The next item is an autographed picture of Sal from his Mafia days. Another item is the Dinner with the Mobster card. You can get this autographed as well. This was an event that Sal had hosted in the past. We also got the Ubots production ticket from an event that Sal had hosted. This is also autographed. The last item we got to offer is Sal's book, The Sins of the Father. Again, you can find all these items in the video description below.